Hey, what's up everyone? This is MusicTechHelpGuy, and in this video, I want to talk a bit about building chord progressions. I am a chord progression first kind of composer. I know a lot of songwriters and composers will start with lyrics, maybe they start with a melody, maybe they start with a beat, maybe they start with the bass line, but in terms of composing, I feel like the most efficient way to get a song going and get your ideas down and form like the skeleton, the bare bones of a composition is the chord progression. In order to form a chord progression, you have to know the key of the song. Now you might think, well, do I need to know if it's in C minor, E flat minor, A major, D major? Do you have to know the key in terms of like the specific root note or tonic note? Well, the answer is no. You just kind of have to know, do I start in major or do I start in minor? Once you make that distinction, you're already sort of streamlining your creative process. Now, in my opinion, you can express a much greater degree of emotions with minor keys than major keys. This is just my personal opinion. If you love major keys, awesome, keep using them. But the vast majority of current popular music and contemporary music typically uses minor keys. So if you know how to build a C major scale, or you know how to build an A minor scale, then I can show you how to build a major key or minor key chord progression. And even if you don't know how to build a C major scale or an A minor scale, I'm gonna show you how to do that in this video. So let's hop into Logic, and I'm gonna show you 3 methods that I use all the time that I think are incredibly helpful for building chord progressions in your DAW, even if you don't know a whole lot about music theory. Well, one of the first things you need to determine is, do I want a major key song, something that's more happy, more uplifting, or do I want something that's more serious, more dark, more somber, which would be a minor key? But I'm going to show you 3 main techniques that I think just about any DAW user can use to build chord progressions, again, even if you know almost nothing about music theory. So let's get right into this. Okay, so let's get started. Now, like I said before, you don't need to know a whole lot about music theory to build chord progressions, at least not with the methods I'm going to show you in this video. I will say this up front, I have a master's degree in music composition, but a degree does not necessarily make me a good composer. A degree just means that I've spent years and years studying music theory and music composition in order to just overall have a better idea of how music works. So a lot of these things just come naturally to me, and hopefully if you repeat these processes multiple times, they will eventually just sort of come naturally to you as well. Music theory is not about punishing you with a bunch of jargon and learning notes and all this other stuff. It's about internalizing the sort of natural musical structures and being able to internalize these things in your head and work with them, just like learning a language. So the first thing we need to do is we need to determine the key. And before you even determine what the root note or the tonic note of the key is, you need to determine whether you're working in major or minor. Now, in order to change the key of your project, you can go to Beats and Project here up in the LCD display, click here, and you can select a key. Now, you don't always have to select a key up here, but if you use one of the methods I'm going to demonstrate in this video, you'll want to set it. So I recommend using C major or A minor to start, and then you can transpose the chord progression to any key you like later on. So let's start with C major, but I'm actually going to end up building a chord progression in A minor to start. But if you're looking for a more happy or uplifting chord progression, you can start in major. If you're looking for something more serious, more somber, you can start in minor. The reason why I say start in C major or A minor is because C major is all white keys on the piano, and A minor is also all white keys on the piano. These are the only 2 scales, the only 2 keys that use all white keys on the piano. The rest of these use some sharps or flats. Now, whether you choose a major or minor key is going to determine the number of notes that you can use in your composition or in your chord progression. So if I would go to the keyboard here, you'll see that from C to C, there are 12 total notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, we don't count the octave, but from C all the way up to B, really, there are 12 total notes. By choosing a key, you are taking that range of 12 notes and sort of quantizing it down to 7 notes. So for example, the C major scale is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. The A minor scale is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. So none of the black keys, none of the sharps or flats are used in C major or A minor. So why is the C major or A minor scale so important when it comes to building chord progressions? Well, the chords that are in that key are actually based on the scale. So for example, if I create a new MIDI region here, I'll open this up in the piano roll editor. And if I start on C2 here, just like so, and then I just continue on up the scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. These are the only 7 notes plus the octave that are used in the key of C major. Now, one way to build chords out of these is to stack notes on top of each of these root notes. The way I like to do this is I like to think about this as root, third, fifth. So in a chord is essentially 3 or more notes that are generally played at the same time to form a harmonic set, if you will. These harmonic sets of notes are based on the scale or the key that you're working in. So in C major, the first chord would be the first, third, and fifth notes of the scale. So if I just take this note and add it over here, that's the third note. If I take this note and move it over here, that's the fifth note. And then for the second chord, root, third, fifth. So D, we have F, and then we have A. So when you have a chord like this, the bottom note is called the root, the middle note is called the third, and the top note is called the fifth. And you can just repeat this process of just using the root, third, and fifth. Now, when you get up to a certain point here on the fourth note, the root would be F, the third would be A, and the fifth would be C. You run out of notes because if I move up to the next one here, G, B, oh, I'm missing a note. If you just keep building that scale all the way up on white keys, this gives you some more reference notes to work with. So again, root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth, and then finally on the last C chord, root, third, fifth. So all I'm doing is using the structure of the major scale to form all of the chords within the C major scale. And these last 4 notes here are just there for reference. I can just delete these. No need to keep those there. So those are the 7 chords that we can use in C major. I'm going to talk a bit about the names of these chords in just a bit, but for now, just know that these are the 7 chords that you can use in C major. Essentially, you're building a chord on top of each of the scale tones, and the top chord is the same as the bottom chord. It's just up an octave. And if I drag over these notes and press Shift Option down, you'll see indeed it's the same chord, just in a different octave. So that's why I say 7 chords, not 8 chords. Now you can do this same thing with A minor. In fact, you know what? Let me do it a different way this time. Instead of using a MIDI region, let's use a pattern region. In fact, for some people, you actually may find this is a little bit easier to do. So create a pattern region. Make sure that you have your key set up here. I'll go with A minor this time. And when you open up when you create a new pattern region with the key set, you'll see that the key is already set here in the step sequencer. And what you can do at this point is you can go to your templates here, your pattern templates, by clicking here. Go to templates and then choose minor, and it'll actually give you 2 octaves of a minor scale. So if you think of this going vertically, that's 1 octave of a minor scale. and that's 2 full octaves. So what's really cool about using the step sequencer for building chords is it's even more visual and even less theory dependent. So if you're having trouble even just learning the notes on the keyboard, like if you're like a complete newbie to this sort of thing, then you know, and you have no clue what any of these piano notes mean, the step sequencer might actually be easier for you. So you choose the key you want, create a new pattern region, open this up, choose one of the templates, either minor or major, and this will create a 2 octave set of notes in the key of your choice. So here's what's really cool. Let's build the scale. Again, these are all white keys, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, no sharps, no flats. All you have to do to build chords is skip a note, and then skip a note, and add a note. So it's add a note, skip a note, add a note, skip a note, add a note. This is the same thing as the root, third, and fifth I just showed you over here in the piano roll editor. Those are all 7 chords in the A minor scale with the octave up at the top. Now, the only difference here is we're using 16th notes instead of whole notes like I was over here. So what I like to do is I like to change the step rate in the step sequencer here to 1, which will make each chord a whole note. And then all you need to do is just trim this out. And there we go. We have all 7 chords in A minor. And if you started in the step sequencer and you want to convert this over to MIDI, you just right-click or control-click on the pattern region. I've already used it up here. You can see Convert to MIDI region. But if you don't see that option, just go down to Convert, and then you'll see Convert to MIDI region, and it converts that pattern region into a MIDI region, and now we can see this in the piano roll editor. So these are the 7 chords in the key of A minor. Now, these are called diatonic chords, because these are chords that fit perfectly within the key. There are some chords and some more advanced chord progressions that use chords that are outside of the normal scale or the normal key, but we're not going to get into that in this video. So this is the very first step. Determine what key you want to be in, either major or minor, and then build a set of chords based on the A minor or C major scale. Now, let's say that you want to be in a different key other than A minor or C major. You can actually very easily transpose these now that you've built all of the chords. So, for example, if I want to be in the key of C minor instead of the key of A minor, all I need to do is count up from A to C. So if I count A is 0, B flat is 1, B is 2, or say A sharp and B is 2, and then C is 3. So 0, 1, 2, 3. I'm counting up in semitones. What I can do is I can select these notes, hold Option, and press up 3 times. And I can transpose that up to C minor, or down to G minor, or down to E flat minor. So the structure of the available chords in any key is exactly the same. It's just a matter of what is the starting note. I'm going to go back to A minor just to kind of keep things simple because this is all white keys and it's just easier to follow. Okay, so that's the first step. The second step is to create a chord bank. So creating a chord bank is very simple. It just involves chopping up each of these whole note chords into individual regions so that you can sort of drag and drop your chord progression and mix and mash these chords. You don't want to just use a chord progression like this, using it in terms of the scale. You know what I mean? Like, this is very boring. Like, you don't just want to go 1, 2, 3, 4. That's boring. You want to jump around between the different root notes in the chords, between the different chord types. So what I like to do at this point is grab the scissors tool, set my snap mode to bar, and then you can chop these up one by one at the bar lines, or you can just hold Option and then use the scissors tool, and it just cuts them up into individual chords. So now what you have is a chord bank, and you can just sort of copy and paste these chords around in any order you like. But what we really need to do here to make this a working chord bank is we need to label each of the chords. You can get as complex with this or simple with this as you want. If you went to music college and you learned about building chords and chord progressions, you would have learned about Roman numeral analysis, basically analyzing each chord with a Roman numeral. I'm going to simplify this even further and just use regular old numbers. So we're going to call these the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 chord. So the 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, the 6 chord, the 7 chord, and the 1 chord. It's not the 8 chord. Anytime you get beyond an octave, you just repeat 1 through 7. So what I like to do is just use the text tool. You can drag over all of these and just type in the letter 1, and it'll automatically label them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I can do the same thing over here. Type in the number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So for example, if I wanted to build a chord progression that was 1, 4, 5, 6, and then I can end on 1 again, I could do that. So again, you're not using these chords in order, you're sort of shuffling them around. And by the way, I want to change the last 1 chord that's up an octave to 1. That's not an 8 chord, so let's go ahead and do that. Now, in traditional music theory, like I said, Roman numerals are used. But again, if you know nothing about theory, the Roman numerals can get really tricky and really confusing. Each of these chords have different qualities. Almost all of them are going to be major or minor chords. Some of them will be diminished chords. The 7 chord in major keys is diminished, and the 2 chord in minor keys is also diminished. So you'll find in a lot of contemporary pop music, the 7 chord in major keys and the 2 chord in minor keys are not used that often, or they're altered in some way. But again, I'm teaching this from a minimal understanding of music theory standpoint, so I'm not going to get too deep into all of that. So that's the second step, create a chord bank, and we've done just that. I'm going to forget about the major key chords, but if you want to work in a major key, by all means, go for it. What I'm going to do is use my chord bank as a skeleton to sort of put down a harmonic progression, to put down a chord progression that the bass is going to follow, that the vocals are going to follow, that any melodies or any other musical ideas are going to follow. You may not even use the chord bank MIDI regions in your final composition, but you can use it as a skeleton for the rest of your musical elements to follow. Now, one thing I want to point out here is all of these chords are actually a special type of chord called a triad. A triad is a chord that only contains 3 notes: a root, a third, and a fifth. All of these chords have a root, a third, and a fifth. There are additional chords like 7th chords, 9th chords, etc., that do not contain only 3 notes. They contain 4 or more notes. But in terms of the terminology, the term triad and chord are often used synonymously. Triad is a chord, but a chord is not necessarily a triad. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so let's build some chord progressions. Let's start on 1. And what you'll find with a lot of compositions is that the song will start and resolve on 1, or the chord progression will just resolve on 1. So let's say we're building like a verse section here at bar 10. Maybe I'll start with 1, then I'll jump up to 3, then I'll go to 7, and I'll go to 6. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, these last 2 chords sound a little high. The register is a bit high. Let's drop them down an octave, and you can do that just by pressing Shift Option down, and you'll see that there's a -12 on each one of those. Remember how we said there are 12 possible notes? That just means we're dropping these down by 12 semitones, so we're dropping them down by an octave. So that could be our starting point for a verse. Maybe we repeat that a few times, 4 times. And I'll go ahead and just add a little marker here. So add a marker, and I'll just call this verse. And then maybe over here at bar 26, I want to come up with another chord progression for a pre-chorus or a build-up section or something. So I'll call this pre-chorus. And maybe this time I'll jump down to the 5 chord. Then I'll use 7. Then I'll use 6. And then I'll resolve up to 1. Let's drop all those down an octave, just like I did before. You know, let's do something different. Let's do something different. The 7-6 at the end of the last verse here, I kind of want to jump to 6 here on the pre-chorus. I actually want to go 6, 7, 1, and then, you know, actually let's end on 1 and let's add a 5 in here. Let's drop that 5 down an octave. You know what? Let's go to the 7 in the second half of bar 29. You don't have to just use whole notes. You can use half notes. You can use different rhythms. But again, we're just using the chords as a skeleton to sort of map out a harmonic progression for the song. So maybe what I'll do is I'll set the division to beat here. I'll hold Option and I'll shorten this to 2 beats. I'll duplicate the 7 chord over. Let's shorten that to 2 beats as well. There we go. Okay, so I've got a verse. The only thing I need to figure out here is how to transition from 1, 3, 7 something to 6. I don't want to just use 6 again, because when you repeat the same chord, it can tend to sound a little repetitive. So let me try just the 1 chord. So this is the last 4 bars of the verse coming into the pre-chorus. And you know what? Let's do what we did over here, 1, 7, just on the end there. There we go. Okay, so let's say our pre-chorus is 8 bars long, and then we want to move into the chorus. So I'll create another marker here. I'll call this chorus. And on this last one here, instead of going 1, 7, let's use 6, 7. So let's grab a 6 from over here. Here's a 6. Again, let's just hold Option and shorten that. Ultimately, on the beginning of the chorus, I think I want to go back to the 1 chord. So let's see what that sounds like. And now we're in the chorus section. So now let's build another chord progression for our chorus. Let's pull our chord bank over here. And for this, I think I'll kind of mimic the verse chord progression. I'll go 1, 3, 6, 7. And then I'll go 1, 3, 5, 6. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, I dropped a couple of those down an octave. Let's try that again. Let's go ahead and add a 6/7 here. So I'll add another 7, shorten that, and I think that will just kind of bring us back to the 1 chord a bit better. Now, one thing I do want to point out here is minor key chord progressions, the combinations you use are going to be much different than in major combinations. Like a 6/7/1 is not going to sound that great in major. You'll find that using like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 work really well together in major keys, whereas in minor keys, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 kind of work really well together. But ultimately, it's, you know, it's up to you what combination you use. If you can make it work, you can make it work. So I'm more concerned about showing you a technique that you can use to quickly create a chord progression, not necessarily diving into all of the minutia and details about this. So let's repeat that chorus one more time. Okay, and just like that, I've sort of created the bare bones skeleton or harmonic sketch that I can use to build out the rest of the song. So what I'm going to do is just join these together by section. So there's the chorus, there's the pre-chorus, and then there's the verse. Now, when you open these up in the piano roll editor, you're going to see a lot of chords that kind of jump around, have different leaps between them. What I like to do at this point is I like to add one more bass note to the bottom of each chord, because that sort of tells me where the bass line needs to be. So what I can do is add another A down here, a C here, and then we have A. Because ultimately you want your bass line to be an octave lower than the chords, and the chords are not going to stay in this arrangement. Eventually what I'm going to get to here is I'm going to create some smooth voice leading for these chords, but the bass line is still going to stay the same. Copy that over, and then in the last one we had A and then G. And let's just set this to a beat. Add the G there. Same thing, I'm just going to make sure I have a bass note that's doubling the bottom note or the root note of each chord down 1 octave. And by the way, you don't have to do it that way. You can always just select these and hold shift. Select just the notes you want and then just hold option. And just drag them down just like so. And I can do the same thing over here for the chorus. Then just hold option, drag those down an octave. So we've built our chord progression, we've built a chord bank that we can use as a compositional tool, we've built our bass line, and the last step here is to apply some smooth voice leading to these chords. Because when you use all root position chords here, it gets a little boring. You know, there's too many leaps in the chord progression, at least up here in these upper chords. It's okay for the bass to have leaps like that, but for the chords, this is just it's a little too jarring. So what I like to do is I like to take either a bunch of notes that are too low or a bunch of notes that are too high and drop them down an octave or pull them up an octave. So I could take all of these upper Gs here and drop them down an octave by pressing Shift Option down. It's the same chord, we're just sort of revoicing that chord so the voice leading is smoother. I could also take these bottom Fs here and move them up an octave, Shift Option up. So essentially we're taking this chord progression where all these chords were jumping around and we're condensing them down to stay in a certain range. This is called smooth voice leading. I can do the same thing for the pre-chorus. Now, one thing I'm going to do here in the chorus before I apply any voice leading is I'm going to show you a quick way to add some additional harmonies just to sort of thicken the chord progression a bit and use some seventh chords, even if you know nothing about seventh chords. So we're still in A minor, so all of the notes are white keys at this point. So if I were to take the top note of any of these triads and I skip a white key and then add a note on the next white key, that's going to create a seventh chord. Now, this particular one is called an A minor 7 chord. If I do it on the the F chord here, F, A, C, skip the D, add an E, this is an F major 7 chord. I could do it down here on the E chord, E, G, B, skip the C, add a D. That's an E minor 7 chord. And again, I don't want to get too deep into what seventh chords actually are. This is just a way to add some additional harmonies that will thicken the texture of your composition in a really nice way. So now that I've added some seventh chords, let's listen to this in root position. And what I can do is I can apply my smooth voice leading just like I did before. So I could take all of these top notes, maybe drop them down an octave. Or I could take some of these bottom notes and pull them up an octave. I think I liked pulling these down an octave a bit better. Let's go ahead and do that. And I think I am going to pull these E's up an octave. Let's try that. So again, we're smoothing out the voice leading so we don't have all these jumps in the chords. And I think on these A chords, the 1 chords, I'm going to go ahead and keep the G up on the top there. And now what I have is a harmonic sketch for my verse, pre-chorus, and chorus of a song, and I can use this. Again, you may not even use these regions exactly as is in your actual song, but you can use these as the basis for your bass line, for your chord instruments. Maybe you want to do something different with the rhythms instead of making it all half notes and whole notes. You can add a melody. You can sing on top of this. Use this to write your vocal melody or write your lyrics. Add a beat to it. Add your drum patterns to it. So this just gives you a sketch, a skeleton to work with so that you're not playing a guessing game and working linearly the entire time. Because I think this is one of the number one hangups, and this is one of the number one hangups I had when I first started writing music, is coming up with a harmonic sketch to follow. So the chords are already there. You already know what notes are going to be in the chords and bass at any given point in time. You just need to do something more interesting with them rhythmically and texturally and tonally, and choosing different arrangements and building out your DAW project, the fun stuff. You know, we've gotten past the chord progression. Now we can focus on the tone and the timbre and the rhythm and the groove and the genre and changing the tempo. But one last thing you can do here is, if the key doesn't work out for you, again, all you have to do is drag over these regions and hold Option and press up or down, and you can transpose up or down to any key you like. So if you bring a singer in and he or she says, you know what, these chords are a little too high for my range, then drop it down a few semitones, and now you're in a completely different key, but using the same chord progression. So there you go. That's 3 or so tips on how to build chord progressions with minimal music theory knowledge, not even touching a MIDI controller, not even touching a real instrument. We're just using our brain and the piano roll editor to build these chord progressions and build a harmonic sketch for a song. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. As always, thank you so much for the support, and thanks for watching.